everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Washington, D.C. Councilmember at Large, Christina Henderson. Councilmember, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
There has been a lot of news out of D.C. this week, especially because President Trump federalized the city's police force and deployed the National Guard to the nation's capital. President Trump said crime is out of control in D.C. and the National Guard will help, quote, reestablish law, order, and public safety in D.C. The D.C. Attorney General has since sued President Trump over the move. What are your thoughts on what's been happening over the past couple of days?
Well, Brittany, as you mentioned at the top, this is a very fast-moving, unprecedented situation that the District of Columbia finds itself in. Even though the Home Rule Act has existed since 1973, we've not had any president who has sought to use this authority, and certainly not seeking to broaden the authority beyond what the letter of the law actually states, which is the basis of the lawsuit that was filed earlier today. Section 740 of the Home Rule Act does allow for the president to request from the mayor the services of the Metropolitan Police Department for the purposes of federal purposes. It does not provide personnel authority, nor does it provide the ability to revoke standard operating procedures that already exist on behalf of the department. So that's what we're heading to court later this afternoon about. But overall, I would say that this declaration of emergency was unnecessary. Crime in the district, violent crime in the district rather, is at a 30-year low. Even the Justice Department touted that earlier this year, not too long ago.
I'm curious, what do you think the solution is here then? Because President Trump says crime's out of control. The DOJ previously said violent crime, like you said, in D.C. had a 30-year low. Statistics indicate that from 2023, homicides and carjackings are down. But I do want to read some reporting from NBC News 4 in July. They reported the D.C. Police Union claimed, quote, police supervisors in the department manipulate crime data to make it appear violent crime has fallen considerably compared to the last year. I'm not in D.C. You're a council member in the city. I mean, what do you make of all of this? Is crime bad in D.C. right now?
Well, DC is home to 700,000 individuals. We are a large urban center. And I'm not suggesting that the city is perfect by any means. We certainly have our challenges in terms of crime, like any city across the country. But what we don't have is a federal government who is sort of inserting themselves into the process, and where they do actually have authority, are falling short on their part. You asked, what could be a better solution here? One of the things that I would suggest is that we continue with the joint operations that we normally run with the federal government around illegal guns and illegal drug trafficking that happens here in the district. There's not a single gun store in the District of Columbia. And I just pulled the stats. A week ago, MPD recovered 49 fire weapons. Let's find out who is selling those weapons, where they're coming from, but we need our federal partners on that, because we know it's not originating here in the district. It's coming from other parts of the country. I think that's a better use of the time if we're really going to talk about how to help decrease public safety.
And speaking of federal partners, have they contacted you before President Trump made this announcement? Was this kind of surprised, thrust upon you as a council member? I mean, did you wake up Monday morning confused?
I watched the press conference like everyone else. I read the president's tweets over last weekend like everyone else. We didn't have advance notice about this. And that's the part that's actually quite frustrating. A lot of people don't realize that the District of Columbia has very limited home rule. So, for instance, we don't nominate and pick our own prosecutors. We don't nominate and pick our own judges. Even when we're talking about a criminal who has been charged with a crime but has been released pre-trial, the District of Columbia is actually not responsible for monitoring those individuals. That's all federal. There has always been sort of this unique partnership between DC government and the feds when it comes to public safety. And this is the first time that we are seeing a shift here in a way that I don't think is actually going to make people more safe, but is yet going to cause more chaos and tension.
And why do you think that chaos and tension will ramp up with the National Guard there? And what does that really look like? Are they just milling around? I mean, what's the mood in DC right now?
So I did see some National Guard individuals earlier this morning who were stationed outside of Union Station. Union Station, as you know or may know, is our Amtrak hub, right? That's Amtrak buses, trains are coming in and out of that area. To me, it just seemed as though the guardsmen were just kind of standing around. As most people realize, like National Guard are not law enforcement, so they're not actually authorized to arrest anyone. They're usually deployed when there's a natural disaster, or some type of event that requires logistics and folks to help provide support to the local government. And so this is definitely outside of their authority. But to your question around some of the tension and chaos, I have federal agents who are patrolling neighborhoods who have very minimal training in terms of actually doing traffic stops. And that has caused some pieces of tension in terms of what are you allowed to do versus not. There was a woman who reported she was stopped at a traffic stop on Benning Road Northeast in DC, and the federal agent, when asking for her ID, said, well, what is your business in the district? That's not a normal question. The District of Columbia is not on the border, and it is not closed for business.
I want to get back to DC's Attorney General suing the Trump administration over federalizing the Metro Police. They said it was, quote, the gravest threat to home rule that the district has ever faced, and they called it a hostile takeover. This is pretty breaking news. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, so we're in court at 2 o'clock. We'll see what the judge rules at that point. My understanding is that the DC Attorney General has asked for a temporary restraining order. This is the hard part. We're kind of in uncharted territory. Like I said, we've never had this happen, but we know that DC is often used as a petri dish. Try out policies and tactics here and then see what you can get in other cities. And so I hope that the rest of the country is keeping their eyes on what's happening here in the district.
And as a council member, have you had conversations this week with the DC police? I mean, what is the mood inside that department?
Well, I mean, obviously I've talked to the leadership of the DC Police Department, but I do have friends who are, officers rank and file who are serving, and this is very frustrating for them. It is also a tension for them. Now you have, DC police officers who have FBI agents or ATF or DEA who are riding along with them. And in some cases, what they don't want is for this whole situation to disrupt the very fragile trust that some of these local officers have been able to build in communities, right? You can't just make a case because you have caught something. There are times when you need witnesses to come forward. You need the community to be able to participate. And they're concerned that once this, temporary state of emergency is over, what is going to be left in the wake?
And there's another component of this too, and it has to do with unhoused people. President Trump said this, quote, the homeless have to move out immediately. That's what he posted on Truth Social. And then when White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about this and how homeless people will be dealt with, that was the question. She said this, quote, homeless individuals will be given the option to leave their encampment, to be taken to a homeless shelter, to be offered addiction or mental health services. And if they refuse, they will be susceptible to fines or jail time. She said these are pre-existing laws that haven't been enforced. But what's the mood about that? What's your reaction to the president and the administration's handling of unhoused people in the nation's capital?
Yeah. So I actually serve as the chair of the Committee on Health for the council, and it was actually last night that I was actually on the phone with the deputy mayor for Health and Human Services, who was out at one of the encampment clearings when I received the other news about what AG Bondi had just done. And this is what I will say: number one, it is not illegal to be homeless. It is not. And while the White House is saying, oh, we're only enforcing laws that are on the books, there is a particular reason why MPD has not been enforcing fines on homeless individuals. Why would you fine someone for being homeless when you know that they can't afford it? And so we have been increasing the number of shelter beds that we have available. We have sent out our outreach workers to be able to talk to folks and get them to a safe shelter. But this is not about solving homelessness. If that were the case, then the Secretary of the Department of Housing would be doing more in terms of providing federal funding for public housing. That's not what's happening here.
I mean, that would be my question reading that. I mean, I think it's safe to say no one wants to be homeless, and you can't. The reason you're homeless is because you don't have money. That is a lot of the reasoning there. I mean, if you find someone who's homeless, how are they going to pay that? I mean, why punish that? I mean, there's another solution. What can you, as a city council member, be doing right now, do you think, or are your hands tied?
Well, so this is also kind of the funny thing of having one hand tied behind my back. As you know, a couple of months ago, the House of Representatives essentially snatched $1 billion from the DC local budget and said that we could not spend it. That is usually money that we would spend on public safety, human services to help homeless individuals, housing, public education, right? And that money didn't go to the federal government. It's literally sitting in our bank account, and we're not allowed to touch it legally because the House of Representatives have not acted on that front. But we've increased the number of shelter beds. We've increased the number of housing vouchers that are available. We're increasing the number of mental health supports. It's just very disconcerting to me that there had been a standard policy across the country, especially when it comes to substance use and mental health, that individuals have the right to voluntarily submit to treatment. Making it mandatory is really taking us all the way back to before the Reagan years. And most people would tell you who was involved in the public health space that that didn't help anybody. You just ended up institutionalizing a lot of individuals for who could have been helped in different ways.
And this really seems to be far from over. Like you said, DC tends to be a petri dish. There's practice, what happens there, and then it could move nationally. And President Trump did indicate that he could take similar actions in other cities, saying this is far from over. He also said he was going to ask Congress for a long-term extension of the federal takeover of the DC police because he said 30 days essentially isn't enough. Where do you think this goes next? I know you have to be in court at 2 p.m.
Yeah, we'll be in court at 2 p.m., but we've already started having conversations with Congress. The president cannot unilaterally extend the public emergency order. That's not what the law says. It has to be an act of Congress, joint act of Congress. And so we're having conversations with our allies and partners on the Hill. It still has not been defined what exactly is the public emergency. Even though the White House is providing particular statistics about the District of Columbia, I could find statistics of other cities in say, red states that certainly trump ours in terms of homicides, robberies, etc. And no one is talking about that. And I'm not suggesting that should be the case. There are definitely ways for which the federal government can provide states and localities with supports around public safety and crime. They are cutting funding for those activities, right? And then saying to those states and localities, you're not doing enough. Now we're coming in and we're stepping in. In 5 days, I have yet to see any data or statistics that suggests having an additional 400, 500 federal agents on my streets in the evening time has resulted in anyone being safer. I have yet to see any statistics that says they have recovered more guns than the MPD normally would. I haven't seen any statistics to suggest that they have, broken up organized drug trade any more than the local police force would do so. And so my question is, how much longer is this sustainable for? These are ATF agents, DEA agents who are supposed to be, and I believe probably were, working on more critical casework that has in the national interest, and they're being pulled to be able to do local traffic stops in terms of checking seat belts and whether or not somebody has tickets or suspended license. I think I would say to everyone else across the country, and particularly in our region, with all of this focus on DC, what's happening in your states and cities, and are you receiving the attention that you're supposed to? I think even in the Midwest, there was some severe flooding that was taking place where, individuals are in need of disaster support. We're in the middle of hurricane season. There's a lot of different things that are going on, and it is not to suggest, again, that the District of Columbia is perfect and there is no crime. But what I am saying here is that there is a better way to handle the situation than what we have right now, which simply amounts to a show of force.
Well, council member, there's certainly a lot to look out for. And after you have that hearing at 2 p.m. and we see what happens next in DC, I hope you can come back on and join me. Council member Christina Henderson, thank you so much for the time. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. Have a good rest of your day.